This is how we start off our shows. Okay, we start off on the left side, and we go hodl, hodl, hodl,
Huddle, huddle.
save, build a,
Build a.
sound money,
Sound money.
sound money.
Sound money.
All right. All right, guys, I'm so honored that my good friend Knut Svanholm is on. I'm going to do a read-through, and I'm going to start a new format, and we'll see how it works. If you like it, please do a thumbs up when you get this video. It is going to be recorded and then professionally edited here. But basically what I want to do is when I do the read-throughs on this article, I want to invite at least one of the people I mentioned, so I have a foil. And Knut's a good foil, and he's lots of fun. It's like we don't see each other for a long time, but it's like we old friends, you know, you just kind of pick up where you leave off. But before,
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Good to see you again, Mr. Goat. Well, I haven't seen you for almost a year, and yeah, thanks for everything last year when we at the conference. I had a great time.
Oh yeah, and hopefully we'll
yeah.
do it again. I'm not going to do it this year. It was so much work, and it was a financial disaster. But that's okay. That's not the point. And I'm not a conference organizer. I think I'll leave that in. I'm going to have a conference. It's going to be very, very small and just with members and a few invited people. So that's kind of the plan that I have, and not try and do any big event again. But before we get started, I do want to mention that the Goat Lady and I are going to be at Tonevay's Financial Summit. And there are just a few places left. I got notified there's going to be over 75 people there. And do you have the link there you can show, the Financial Summit? And so just go to the Financial Summit. Again, there's a few spots left. And there it is. It's in the Dominican Republic. They've got a whole island and a castle there that we have just for ourselves. All right, so we're done with that, and now let's get to the real stuff. And I wrote an article, and I just got it out last night, called The Elusive Hyperbitcoinization. I actually started out the myth of hyperbitcoinization, but I said, you know what, I don't know if it's a myth or not. It might just be elusive. So, and I call it the evangelism of making an ought to an is, because I think most people in the Bitcoin community, we think that Bitcoin ought to be sound money around the world, but we might just be, you know, whistling Dixie too. So I'll start reading, and just interrupt me whenever you want, Knut. But this is a statue of Satoshi Nakamoto at the Graphic Soft Park in Budapest. And I thought those beautiful little thing, and put that to lead the article. What is hyper-Bitcoinization? And actually, the term was coined by Daniel Krazitz in 2014. There's a link to that article. He's a shitcoiner now, though. I don't know. Did you know that, Knut?
Yeah, I almost forgot about him since he started shitcoining.
I think he's in with, who's that guy, the SIV or SV, any rate.
With Craig Wright?
Craig Wright. I think he's in that crowd. Yeah, I think he's in that crowd.
Okay, then he's more than a shitcoiner. He's
he's
a
scammer.
He's a real fecal matter.
Real fecal matter. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
since then, the term has been accepted as Bitcoin gospel by many of my Bitcoin heroes. And for the most part, it's not a question of if, but when. I think for most of them, they think, yeah, it's going to happen. We just don't know when. Few agree on what the term really means, and because it can mean a lot of different things, a lot of different people. But for the sake of this article, I'm just going to use the definition that Bitcoin Magazine used, and that is hyper-Bitcoinization is the inflection point at which Bitcoin becomes the default value system of the world. And there's a link to that there, Hypercoinization explained. This is a great interview. How did you land this one? This is a great interview that you did with Saifedean. I just listened to it. You know, I was doing my research. I said, wow, I didn't know you did that. When did you do that? It was about a year ago?
Maybe half a year ago.
Okay.
The last thing I did with Saifedean was eating Wagyu beef at Sailor's house.
At Michael Saylor's house?
Yeah.
Wow,
you've
been around the world more than once then.
Yeah, I've been I've been upping my Bitcoin game.
So what is where was that at the Miami conference then, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He was kind enough to invite a couple of plebs in to his castle, uh, and we were having the time of our lives there.
Well, he's
Yeah,
a great teacher. I
good
mean, there's
stuff.
without a doubt. Now, he was definitely nominated to be a Bitcoin standard bearer this last year, hands down the most popular because he's done so much, to educate people, and and he's just a great salesman for Bitcoin. So then I noticed I found this one too, which was a panel they had at the Miami 2021 conference, and it had all my heroes, Parker Lewis and Saifedean and Dan Held, and then BJ was the moderator. But that was just another great idea. But again, the assumption is that it's going to happen, okay, and but there's other people that don't think it will be, and so I brought those up, and the most prominent one I think is Luke Groman, and he wrote, in my opinion, Bitcoin won't be transactional currency unless it has stopped being a store of value via fiat currency debasement. Here's the question. Why would anyone spend BTC, which hedges fiat debasement, when those people could spend fiat? This is just a version of Gresham's law, where bad money chases out good, and it's why it's very hard to find pre-1964 dimes or quarters in circulation. Their silver content makes them far more valuable than their face value, so people, when they do get them, remove them from circulation. If the view is that within 10 years, BTC will be transactional currency because it will have displaced fiat currency, I do not think governments will surrender that seigniorage privilege of fiat without a significant fight. And then we had the debate with Bcash with Roger Ver, and Jimmy Song made a similar point, and I think it was after that debate, or I don't know if it was after or before, but he tweeted something out. You can go check the article here that, look, if I use my credit cards because they're the most convenient, I get rewarded for using them, and then if I need the money, I'll pay the whole bill with my with Bitcoin, or sell the Bitcoin and then pay the bill. And people were all over him for that because, well, that's not using it as cash. That's not buying coffee with Bitcoin. So, but he makes it clear and this is the way I did it too. I said, I definitely understood it. We've been doing it for years. It's kind of stupid. We don't want to use Bitcoin in retail trade. And I especially don't now, if we had sound commercial banking, I would, because then it would represent other wealth coming into the market. But we don't have notes that are denominated in Bitcoin that represent the new wealth being offered in the marketplace. Also, F.A. Hayek, who I consider the greatest economic theorist, of our time, or at least maybe the past generation, he envisioned private money would never do away with government money. Rather, he saw private money and free banking competing with government money and actually making government money more honest. And here I quote him, and this is an article he wrote in 1986. It seems probable that for a long time the use of such a common international unit of exchange at least be used chiefly in wholesale or other large-scale transactions, although including also much expenditure on travel. And I agree with that. That's basically how I use Bitcoin, or large purchases. I do not contemplate that the standard will be used as a pricing in retail trade. For local business, coins and notes, and even some checks or credit cards, a local currency may well remain indefinitely preferred. But I would anticipate that once such a unit exists, it will become increasingly the unit of long-term business contracts. Contracts will be made in the standards, the future value of which I suggested in denationalization of money, that gradually the courts would come to interpret all contracts as intended to be expressed in a stable monetary unit, so that the difficulty of certain value of contracts disappears. And there it is, the article I wrote years ago on Bitcoin is the standard. I think I think the first time I found you, I published your article. You wrote maximalism is a non sequitur.
Yeah. Early stuff.
Yeah, and that was really, I mean, you were one of the few that caught on to it. And that's what I disclaim being a maximalist. So I hopefully I'm not, most of my friends are maximalists or self proclaimed. That's when I became a Bitcoin standard bearer. So the premise of Bitcoinization, and again, correct me, you may not agree with this, Knut, but it's based on the idea that government money will disappear. And that might be desirable, but my question is it realistic? And if it's realistic, is it really desirable?
Yeah. May I answer, Mr. Goat? Because
Yes,
I'm a
please.
bit short on time.
Yeah.
The thing, I have so many things about hyper-Bitcoinization. My latest article talks about the time after hyper-Bitcoinization and what such a world may look like, and it's called The Real Scaling Solution. And in that article, I argue that the real scaling solution is that the necessity for transactions to happen at all goes down and not up on a Bitcoin standard. And this is partly due to Bitcoin being incentivizing saving rather than spending, but it's and people adopting a lower time preference. But it's not only that; it is also because Bitcoin enables us to trust each other on a whole different level, because it removes the incentives for violence on several layers of society, if not all layers. But back to the point of hyper-Bitcoinization and
no, I want to explain
money.
that one. How does Bitcoin actually? I mean, because you're making a moral argument for Bitcoin, and I have a hard. I kind of look at Bitcoin as being like a guillotine, and it can be certainly used for good, but it can also be used for evil. So I don't know.
Yeah, so I'll try to explain that. If 99% of what you own is in Bitcoin, so say you own a house, but you own 99 times the value of that house in Bitcoin, and you keep the location of the Bitcoin in your head, and nobody knows how many you have, where they are, or whatever, then a potential attacker or a malicious actor could threaten you and even kill you, but it would be more profitable for them to keep you alive and to trade with you. And even if they extorted you to give away all your Bitcoins, you could give away some of them and they could never know how many you actually owned. So, and that's just one aspect of how Bitcoin removes the profit motive from violent action.
Well,
we've only seen the beginning of this. I'm
Okay.
talking like centuries from now, because this will play out short term. This is nothing that you or I will ever experience, the peacefulness that comes out of it. But centuries from now, I think Bitcoin is sort of inevitable, and that it removes the need for nation states altogether.
All right.
But I'd like to address another thing.
All right. Okay. Go for it, man. And then I'm ready.
Yeah.
We're getting in the groove now.
Yeah, we are, aren't we? And that's about Gresham's law. And Gresham's law is true until a certain inflection point where Tier's law takes over. If you know about Tier's law, which is sort of the opposite of Gresham's law, and you can see Tier's law in.
How's that spelled? How does that spell Sears law?
THIER.
Okay.
Thier.
Okay.
So yeah, and that's what's happening in Venezuela and Cuba and places like this, where you have the national currency is inflating at such a rate. So you're in a hyperinflationary scenario. And what happens then is that merchants will stop accepting the hyperinflating currency as payment for goods and services, and they will start only accepting a better currency. And that is when the good money wins in the long run. It's the same thing with hyper-Bitcoinization. It's not when people start using Bitcoin for everything. It's when people stop accepting other means of payment, because the other means of payments are so obviously worse to for them to accept than the real deal, which is Bitcoin. So, and since Bitcoin is superior money in sort of every monetary metric you can come up with, I believe that over time, people will start to, first they'll accept Bitcoin alongside the national currency. But as the Bitcoin economy grows, they'll realize that it's futile for them to accept anything but Bitcoin for their goods and services. And that's the true beginning of hyper-Bitcoinization, when people stop accepting anything but Bitcoin for their goods and services. And that's when we get to a real Bitcoin economy.
Okay.
And furthermore, other points I'd like to make is that hyper-Bitcoinization is first and foremost a personal thing, like everything else in Bitcoin. In Bitcoin, knowing is owning. It's the same thing. It's in your brain. The information about the asset is the asset. And also that there's no end point to hyper-Bitcoinization, because sats will continue to get lost and Bitcoin will be deflationary in the future, meaning that, but they will still be infinitely divisible on the Lightning Network, which means that we can run the entire world economy on a finite number of tokens that is diminishing over time, meaning that the purchasing power goes up. So real far ahead in the future, you have to think these thought vectors through to their very wherever they lead you.
I get it.
And people's stacks, most people's stacks will diminish and not grow because they're finite. The total amount is finite. So you can even run a business with red numbers and it will still be good for you because your purchasing power will go up as your stack is diminishing slower than it would have if you hadn't started the business. So this is where I am.
Okay. I'm going to question you on the one idea, and that is that, I think one of the assumptions that I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you think violence is rational, that people are going to act rationally and not, and I don't think violence, rationality, if people were rational, they would not be violent.
A question, by rational, do you mean rational in the praxeological sense, that there is some thought preceding it? In the praxeological sense, rational just means that it's that some thought went into it. It doesn't mean that it's a sound thought, but it means that it's not an instinct, but a deliberate action.
I think it could be either one. It could be a deliberate action, or it can be an instinct. I think most of them are deliberate. I think a lot of them are deliberate actions in the short run. I think,
but I mean, a deliberate action can either be a well thought through action or not very well thought through, but that's what you mean in the praxeological sense when you say an action is rational. It's simply that it's not an instinct. So, and violence, people are violent to each other because they believe that they can get something out of being violent. Most violent actors do their violent things for a purpose. They want to extort the other guy and get some money from them or something of value from them. And it's very easy for the one that has the monopoly on the weapons, which is the state, to do that because they can extort everyone. And they don't even have to ask for permission. They can come point a gun at you and ask you to pay your taxes. And even worse, they can print more fiat tokens and stealing wealth from you in that covert way. But with Bitcoin, that all of that becomes impossible. So the financial motives for being violent and coercive against your fellow man slowly but surely disappears as we move on to a Bitcoin standard world. And I think, of course, violence won't disappear completely. That is not going to happen.
Yeah, but it's not the thing, right? But it's not the things that it's the envy that creates the violence. It's really not the things, or and people I mean, I think most socialists realize
you're talking about small criminals, but the envy that the socialist apparatus is so big, and it steals from absolutely everyone,
Oh,
and
I
it's
know.
everywhere. So
Absolutely.
so it's not only envy, it's a systematic error, or like it's a system that we all live in that is coercive at its core, and we're moving on to a system that is based on verification, which enables us to trust one another to a much larger extent.
Okay.
So I think we're headed in that direction over time.
All right. Well, and I also, because I know you're what, agnostic or atheist, so you, also in your thinking generally it requires, if you look at the past, it requires a very long time frame of millions or billions of years, and maybe in the future you're looking at it in the same way. I
Uh,
mean,
uh, yeah, let me just define how I view my atheism, or the word atheism. I, it's just a denial of the religious stories I've been told so far. It
okay.
says nothing about my beliefs outside of that. It's just a denial of a certain set of beliefs. So it tells you nothing about my opinions on evolution, or the Big Bang, or the how old the world is. Uh, I find certain things to be more plausible than others, but the word atheism says nothing about that. It only says something about that I reject a certain set
Okay.
of belief systems, including Hinduism, Islam, and Christianity.
I understand. You know, that's why we have a wonderful communication. You just say, "Wow, you're the weirdest Christian I've ever met," because I never asked you to invite Jesus into your heart.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Mr. Jesus, yeah, I
um,
remember him.
so
Yep.
yeah, if you can invite him in, you can invite him out. You know, so that's
Yeah, yeah,
it depends.
yeah.
You know, who's doing the saving here. So at any rate, uh, and this is why I love having discussions with people that, hey, we are two different people. We have two different backgrounds, but we have this common thing called Bitcoin, and it really does take conversation up to another level. And that's one thing that I would say is that I do think I have a real problem applying the moral argument. I think that Bitcoin, I think science is useful but not true. I think that science can tell us how, to make Bitcoin or make the best guillotine, but it doesn't tell us how to use Bitcoin. And that's really up to us and where we're going, and that does depend upon human action. So the next thing I go to is the gold standard, and because in my humble opinion, that's the guidepost of where we need to go, and because it happened already in the Gilded Age, and I don't mean the raw commodity gold. Just like when I talk about Bitcoin and Bitcoin standard, they're two different things, and while banknotes were redeemable in gold and gold was legal tender, very few people really possessed gold or gold coins under the gold standard, and very little reserves were needed. The commerce was conducted with gold banknotes, and they were redeemable for gold. In other words, it was a measuring stick, it was a meter stick or a yardstick that represented the new wealth that was being offered in the marketplace. And the dollar was simply a defined weight in gold. It was a measure of account. And the sound commercial banking, and this is from my mentor E.C. Harwood, who was also a wonderful agnostic who I loved. But he said no economist started it off, though. There was never an economist alive who had the wit to think it up. It just evolved because it was obviously necessary, obvious to a banker. He's got gold reserve. He can create more claims against it and not go broke, provided those claims are covered by an equal value of something else. So, as wealth is being produced, you can actually, so they can pay their suppliers and pay their workers, then those notes represent that new wealth, and they're actually the money supply is actually expanded and contracted by the marketplace by using this mechanism that they discovered and emerged organically, like Bitcoin, over 100 years ago. The only role that government had was it decreed the standard to be used in the marketplace, and again, the marketplace expanded and contracted that money supply, and the only thing that governments did is if there were disputes, those would be resolved in the courts. So what I'm trying to point out here is what we mean by hyper Bitcoinization. Does it really mean that people will have the physical Bitcoin, or that we're just commerce is being conducted on that Bitcoin standard? Very little gold reserves are required for the organic emergence of sound commercial banking under the gold standard. And I believe very little Bitcoin reserves are required in Bitcoin banking, so long as those notes issued represent real wealth. And as long as there is a marginal value of profitability, I mean, and this is kind of the argument I make against the Rothbardians who believe in a 100% reserve. The problem is, there's a lot of profitable things out there, but only the most profitable, only the most least marginal businesses will flourish under that system. In fact, they don't flourish at all because it's never existed. The reason we had the Gilded Age is because man learned that's when they developed basically self-liquidating commercial paper. And as the purchases are made, the non-inflationary purchasing media is retired, and the adequate reserves remain balanced. If the value of Bitcoin rises sharply in relation to other things, now hodlers who have that in their mind, they learn the windfall and they rush to the market to purchase a new wealth they could not previously afford. So in this sense, self-custody hodlers like Knut and I, we act as a decentralized bank of last resort. Self-custody hodlers willingly bail out sound banks and are enriched for doing so, while unsound banks are diminished or fail entirely. Self-custody hodlers provide added liquidity in free market banking by exchanging their digital fixed supply asset for the new supply of tangible assets that comes with wealth creation in free markets with sound money and free banking. It's not a sum-zero game. If you have a 100% reserve requirement, which would have to be imposed by force, it's not a sum-zero. It is a sum-zero game, but with banking, it's not a sum-zero game. But it's a win-win, win-win. It's a win for the wealth producers. It's a win for the workers and their suppliers. It's a win for the bankers who fill the gap. And it's a win for the hodlers who save for the future and provide the liquidity when it's needed. And nor is this description like the unsound practices of today in the crypto world, where we see all this money created ex nihilo, all this tokenization without representing any new wealth whatsoever. And in Tokenville, the value of the species does not increase, but it devalues over time. High rates of return are promised that cannot be sustained, devaluing the shitcoins of Tokenville all the more. In Tokenville banking, no new wealth is created. They create the money without creating any new wealth. And it results in the credit contagion we're experiencing today now in this crypto world. There's an article I wrote on hodlers are the bank of last resort, why I think that's a truism that we'll see developing. And will some type of hyper Bitcoinization emerge? Well, looking at the organic emergence of sound commercial banking on the gold standard, it does seem like it's possible. But I think only if this generation can relearn and apply that lost art of commercial banking on the Bitcoin standard. Nor should we expect to see the masses hodling Bitcoin with private keys. Now, I recommend it. I think wise people will, but most people aren't. And just like most people during the Gilded Age, they didn't own gold, and gold was hardly circulating. It may be wise and prudent, but it's hardly necessary. And Bitcoin banknotes will circulate as cash, and hodlers with hard storage are the bank of last resort in the world of free market banking on the Bitcoin standard. So hodlers will keep the sound commercial banking honest. And they are the ultimate bailout. They are now the bank of last resort.
Ugly, may I add something? Because I think you're missing a part of the equation here.
Okay. I'm probably missing a lot.
Yeah, the real reason that gold wasn't circulating is that gold isn't very saleable across space. And that's what fiat solved. There's a very good explanation about this in Saifedean's new book, the Fiat Standard, but it's kind of obvious when you think about it. Like, gold is very saleable across time. It keeps its value across time, but it's a physical thing and it's heavy, and it's hard and expensive to transport, so it does not sell very well over space because of the additional costs. And fiat solved for that to a large extent, because exchanging notes and later on digital representations of dollars is much cheaper across space than gold could ever be. Bitcoin, on the other hand, does both, and especially if you account for the Lightning Network, where it's basically free and instant to send Bitcoin privately to anyone else in the world within an instant. So and you can also do microtransactions, much smaller units than you could in the old legacy system. So Bitcoin doesn't have those hurdles that gold had, that made gold centralized and easy to capture for malicious actors. Bitcoin can get distributed all over the world in a way that gold never had the chance to do. So we're talking about a completely different beast than gold here. We have to remember that Bitcoin is not gold.
It's not.
It's way better.
Well, we both agree with that. I mean, I'm not debating that, and I understand that, but I think the practicality is uh, uh, the likelihood of governments, and to me, the only way governments will be able to compete with Bitcoin is someday down the line, and I don't think it's that far off. We will see them reinstitute a gold standard, and I think,
Yeah,
and I think that's
I don't think
I
we're
think it's
getting to that. I think there's too many idiots in government at this point, and that's a product of unsound money the last 50 years. It's like that produces idiots on top everywhere, and so I have very little hopes for governments ever going back to a gold standard. I think uh, hyper-Bitcoinization happens before that. And to the banking point, I mean, uh, anyone in the world can own Bitcoin, but even if they need to borrow money, they can do so, and it can be fully verified that the bank there or the person they're lending the money from actually has the money within Bitcoin, because it's so transparent. So so fractional reserve banking is not uh, it's much harder to hide on a Bitcoin standard. I mean, I think there should be no fractional reserve banking at all, because it's a very dangerous thing. But people, if there will be fractional reserve banking in the future, people will have the tools to see what's actually going on behind the curtains. And I think what will happen is that interest rates will go up to what they're supposed to be, because a negative interest rate cannot exist. Everyone discounts the future. We have a time preference. All of us do. We'd rather be paid now than later, and we'd rather pay for something later than now if it is the same amount of money. I mean, so I think interest rates are artificially low, and that they will get back to where they are supposed to be on a Bitcoin standard, or whatever you may call it. And
well, I don't.
looking forward to
Okay, but interest rate in what, the fiat currency or because right now, I mean,
in Bitcoin.
Okay.
Yeah, of course, in denominated in Bitcoin, because like interest rates on fiat are artificial. In fiat, you get rewarded for taking on huge loans, and the winner of the fiat system, the winners of the fiat systems, of the fiat system is are those that take on huge loans and buy assets with the money.
Understood.
Yeah, and and that is a very, very unsound system, and it breaks at some point.
Right, and yeah, but that's
Yeah,
not that. Yeah, and I don't think we have any disagreement there. What I'm arguing is that uh, you have an entrepreneur that's creating wealth, and he literally
yeah,
created wealth, and it's just, that's what the sound commercial banking is. They've got this wealth, this new product, and the bank the art of the banker was he recognized this, and would create not inflationary purchasing media. Now, it's not inflationary because it actually does represent the new wealth. Now they're not going to loan. They're going to estimate the value, and maybe depending upon what business it is, loan them 10% or 20% or maybe 80, as much as 80% of the value. But then as those purchases are made, and now the analogy I give is a swap meet. That, you know, this is money creation. You pay the employers, you pay your suppliers. You all go to the swap meet. Everybody has all this different items, and the notes are actually retired at the end of the swap meet, except those that are carried over because I want to spend them on the next swap meet. And that's that was the explanation that I had. But because there's just no way that 100% reserve has ever been able to meet the new wealth created in the marketplace.
No, but it doesn't have to, and this is an important point, because like this, we don't need that type of price stability when the currency is going up in value indefinitely. Then that makes no sense in such a world, and I think people.
Well, it does if it's required. Go ahead.
I think people vastly underestimate how different hyper Bitcoinized world would be to the world we live in today, and I think people in such a world will live vastly different lives.
So let me ask you this:
rewired in
the issue might be coming back to the reserve. In other words, you basically come from the Rothbardian school that you believe that there should be no banking whatsoever, and that there should be 100%. Reserve.
We did.
I mean, Rothbard actually wrote
was a way better thinker than Hayek. I recently read a book by Hayek, and I like Rothbard's line of thinking a lot better. So we disagree there.
And I understand, and I think that's going to be a
good discussion.
No, it isn't. But Rothbard, you know that he got really mad at me when I read his book. I called him a gold socialist, and. and Milton Friedman. I didn't know who Milton Friedman was. I get this letter from Hoover Institute and Milton Friedman. Who's Milton Friedman? And he says, "Oh, I saw your article on Murray Rothbard. Here's an article I wrote on gold and pseudo gold standards." So,
it's 10 past. Mr. Goat, I'm so sorry, but I have to go.
Hey, that's fine. That's perfect.
Meeting scheduled 10 minutes ago.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on, man, and we'll do it again. But thank you for doing this. And guys, if you like what we did here, give it a thumbs up. We're going to edit this and make it a little better. All right.
Great seeing you again.
Thank you.
All the best, and give my best regards to the Goat Lady, of course, and everyone else down there.
We'll hope to see you soon.
Same.
Well, I'm sure we'll cross paths at some conference or another one of these days again.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye, Knut.
Bye.
All right. Guys, before I leave, I want to, if you like what's going on here, I want to promote my 2 books. This is How to Put Yourself on the Bitcoin Standard, and it's a hard edition book. It's fully illustrated. You're going to get some of our little certificates for Bitcoin. And we also have Equity Trading, which is kind of my book that people are most interested in. If you can go order them on Amazon, but they're $129 each. So I priced them deliberately high because you can buy them through me directly and get both of these hardbound books signed by me for $199.95. Plus, you'll get the ebooks, which are available on Amazon for $79. But that's not all. Okay, we have a Telegram group you'll be a part of. We're giving away again. This is just gifts on top of that. We're going to give you the Bitcoin Standard. You may already have this, but it's a great book by Saifedean Ammous. And if you already have one, we're going to send you another one. Just give it away to a friend. We have the little Bitcoin book here by Jimmy Song and his crew. We've got Knut's book, who we just talked to, Sovereignty Through Mathematics. We have a little Bitcoin Money book. This is available in Spanish or English, and it's by Bitcoin Rabbi. And we're going to send you a Jade wallet. Now, we're also going to send you the Bitcoin bag there and some other goodies, either a shirt or a hat or something like that. So again, that's available. There it is. It's Bitcoin Starter bag. Just go to Bitcoin Start Kit or you go to bitcoinstarterbag.com, and there they are. There's an English edition and a Spanish edition. Again, 2 of the books are available in Spanish, so if you want the Spanish edition, be sure to order that. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. Give us a thumbs up if you like this, and we'll see you another day. Bye-bye.